Chapter 2. Mechanisms.
Their room in the girls' wing was far too bright for Rose's mood. Two large, almost identical wardrobes, two desks lined up against the wall, two beds separated by a narrow strip of carpet, everything in beige and washed-out green, as if someone had chosen the colors specifically to suit the belief that emotions were unnecessary. The only element that contradicted that idea was Caroline.
She was standing on her bed in just socks and a t-shirt, trying to stick up photos from her summer holidays. She was laughing because the tape kept peeling away. Scattered around her on the duvet lay magazines, cassette tapes, colorful hair clips, and a dress catalog that someone should have thrown out long ago.
When Rose came in, Caroline turned at once. She had been waiting for that sound of the door handle for hours.
At last! She jumped off the bed, not caring that one of the photos immediately fell to the floor. I thought they'd kidnapped you on the way and returned you to some more serious school.
She hugged her so tightly that Rose lost her breath for a second. Caroline smelled of the same cheap apple body spray as always, and of hairspray that had very little to do with St. Oswald's regulations. Rose returned the hug, but less enthusiastically. Caroline noticed it in the brief hesitation of her arms, in the way they slackened for a heartbeat before regaining their usual energy.
"The train was delayed," Rose said with a shrug. "And there was the speech in the hall." "I know. I heard it was as boring as ever. My father insisted on driving me because it's on the way, which in his language meant 2 hours late and an argument about whether I should bring an extra trunk of shoes. I rushed into school just as the headmaster was finishing his droning on about testing us." Caroline waved a hand. "I tried to spot you in that crowd, but you always sit where no one can see you. Anyway, you're here." "I have so much to tell you. I'll have to talk in my sleep if I'm going to get through it all before the end of term." She dropped onto her bed and patted the space beside her. Rose put her bag down by the wall, lined up more neatly than necessary. The movement took her a fraction of a second longer than it needed to. She was buying herself time. "How was it at home?" she asked, sitting on the edge of Caroline's bed. "After exams?" "Dull." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Mom went to stay with my aunt, Dad worked, and I got stuck at parties where everyone kept asking if that friend of yours from boarding school is coming as well." She put on a thin, breathy voice, imitating her aunt. "Honestly, Rose, if you knew how many times I heard your name said like you were some exotic pet." Rose's mouth tightened slightly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be ridiculous," Caroline snorted. "Thanks to you, at least I had something to show off about. My friend made the Cavendish Grant shortlist," she drawled theatrically. "You should have seen their faces, as if I'd started hanging around with the royal family." Silence settled over the room for a moment, filled only by muffled voices from the corridor and a door slamming somewhere in the neighboring dormitory. Rose felt the word friend land between them, heavier than all the suitcases she had carried that day. She was not sure she still had the right to wear it. "That's nothing," Caroline went on, oblivious to her quiet. "I saw the list. Guess who else is on it?" "I can guess," Rose said. "The Benefactors Board spoke to me today." Caroline burst out laughing at once. "Victor Ashby, Olivia Taylor, and Matt Whitby," she announced with satisfaction. "I told you this was how it would end. They're on every list, born finalists. First his brother, now him. It's like a family tradition, right next to fox hunting and tax avoidance." In her head, Rose corrected her roommate's words. Born participants, not finalists. There could only ever be one finalist. Out loud, she said only, "I saw him." Caroline immediately leaned closer. "And?" Her eyes sparkled the way they had last year when they eavesdropped on the prefects outside the head of house's office. Is he as awful as he used to be, or worse? The image of Whitby on the stairs flashed in Rose's mind with uncomfortable precision. The button he had not done up, the tie that served no purpose except to demonstrate his contempt for rules, that single-word ticket, tossed offhandedly and landing exactly where it should not. She could have told Caroline the truth. Instead, she chose the safer route.
"He's predictable," she said. "Exactly what you'd expect when you see a name engraved in brass. Too sure of himself, too loud, too—"
"Handsome?" Caroline suggested with a grin. Rose hesitated only a moment. "Too used to everyone looking at him," she finished. "That's dangerous enough." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Oh, Rose, you really can kill any romantic subplot before it begins." She got up and went over to Rose's still unpacked bag. "Speaking of murder, if I see you in the same school skirt as last year, I will personally strangle you with Whitby's tie. Show me what you brought." Rose automatically shifted the bag closer to her. "Just books and notes." She bit her tongue before she added, "as usual." "I know." Caroline smiled, but there was the faintest trace of something in her voice that Rose could not name. Disappointment, weariness. "That's why I like you." She paused. "But this year you really do have to leave the room sometimes. I am not spending our final year at St. Oswald's watching my best friend turn into a footnote in the library catalog." Rose felt a stab of guilt, sharp and sudden, like a finger pressing straight into a wound she had been pretending not to notice. Caroline said, "my best friend," with such ease that the words seemed weightless in her mouth. For Rose, they meant everything, and at the same time they were a luxury she was not sure she could afford. "We'll see," she said quietly. "I have more duties this year. Volunteering, the library, that whole engagement program if I want them to take me seriously for Cavendish at all." Caroline snorted. "Engagement. I love how they dress up exploiting pupils in pretty words." She went to the window and pulled back the heavy curtains. "But fine, you'll be the library lady, I'll be the party lady. Between us, we'll look after this tragic year group." She turned back with a wide smile, clearly expecting Rose to join in the joke. Rose tried. She managed to lift the corners of her mouth. She had no idea if it was enough. She knew only this: the higher Caroline bobbed on the waves of school life, the more firmly Rose pressed herself into the seabed, counting every step, every point, every percentage. And the further they went into this year, the more clearly she felt they could no longer move at the same pace, even if they still shared the same room. The St. Oswald's office had always been a place where paper had more rights than people. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Ring binders were arranged alphabetically by surname, and the air was thick with the smell of toner and tea that had long since gone cold. Rose joined the queue for the desk, clutching an envelope with her documents like a pass to something she had not yet named. "Next," the secretary said, without looking up from her stack of forms. It was the same woman as always, middle-aged, hair scraped back tightly, glasses on a chain. Rose had the feeling she did not age so much as yellow, like a sheet of paper on which new names were added every year. "Rose Hartley," she said, handing over the envelope. The secretary opened it in a single practiced movement. Her eyes skimmed the papers, lingered on something, narrowed slightly. "Hartley," she muttered. "Yes, we have you." Rose heard that have, impersonal, institutional. Here she was not a person, just a file. Accommodation unchanged. The secretary ticked something on a list. Tutorial group the same as last year. And, she reached for another stack of pages, assignment to the Community Engagement Program.
She slid a thin form across the desk, the heading printed in block capitals, Volunteering, Library and Archive. Underneath, in the box marked Working Pair Assignment, someone had written 2 names by hand in neat, even ink.
Rose read her own name, and beside it, Victor Ashby.
Her rival for the grant.
"Is there a problem?" the secretary asked, seeing that Rose did not immediately take the form.
"No," she said quickly. "I just don't remember us being in the same group."
"Because you aren't," the woman shrugged. "Ashby is a year above, but he has an unfulfilled library component." She picked up a pen and drew a small cross in the box marked Acknowledged. "Report to the archive today at 5 p.m. sharp. Professor Llewellyn does not like anyone being late to the privilege of communing with the school's history."
In her mouth, privilege sounded like punishment. Rose nodded. "I understand." As she stepped away from the desk, she nearly walked straight into Caroline, who had apparently decided the corridor behind the office was the perfect place to lie in wait. "And?" Caroline practically blocked her path. "Tell me they gave you something sensible. You're not going to be wiping tables in the dining hall, are you?"
"Library and Archive," Rose said, handing her the form.
Caroline's eyes flicked over the heading, and she grimaced. "Of course." She passed it back. "Where else would they put you?"
"You can always count books," Rose replied. "They count towards engagement, too."
"It's just that books won't invite you to the Cavendish Hall ball," Caroline shot back. But there was more concern than malice in her voice. "Victor Ashby," she mused, smiling. "Quiet, proper, the sort who never gets detention because simply living by the rule book is reward enough for the school." "Sounds safe," Rose said, although safe was not the word she wanted for this year.
Caroline glanced at the clock above the office door.
"You've got 2 hours until your privilege of communing with history," she grinned. "Perfect amount of time to drop by the common room. Apparently someone smuggled in real wine. You need to let people actually see you before you disappear into dust and catalogs."
"Caroline," Rose began.
"Don't say no straight away," her friend cut in. "Half an hour, I promise. No spin the bottle, no weird questions. Just some music, a few stupid holiday stories. You can even bring Horace if you like, and we'll pretend it's a literary discussion group."
In theory, she could agree. Half an hour was not much. Half an hour was a few pages, a handful of lines of notes, a single example of how to interpret a poem. In practice, it was the difference between walking into the archive with her mind already submerged in the task and walking in still carrying scraps of laughter and wine. "If I'm late for the first session, Professor Llewellyn will remember it all year," she said at last, "and I can't afford for anyone here to remember me for that." Caroline sighed theatrically. "You and your reputation." She shook her head, but there was no real anger. "Fine, go to your ghosts in the archive, but promise you'll come tomorrow, after Latin. We'll have a little start-of-year celebration. You can even explain what's so great about this Horace person."
Rose hesitated. Promise was a strong word, too strong for something that, in her head, lost to the Cavendish Grant in every possible comparison.
"I'll see how my timetable looks," she answered non-committally.
Caroline finally stepped aside, hands raised in mock surrender.
"One day you'll write all this in some boring diary," she said with a smile, "and I'll be that colorful background character everyone likes but says, shame she's in it so little."
"I don't think you're background," Rose said honestly.
Caroline did not believe her, but she smiled as if she wanted to.
When Rose left the office, she was gripping the form so tightly the paper had creased slightly. Victor Ashby, Archive, 5 p.m. She had a feeling that line, not the wine in the common room, was what would matter in the results column at the end of the year.
And at St. Oswald's, results were recorded in marble.
The entrance to the library basement was easy to miss. Wedged between a shelf of encyclopedias and the notice board, it looked more like a door to a mop cupboard than a gateway to the heart of St. Oswald's tradition, as some overzealous alumnus had once called it in a brochure. Narrow, heavy, paneled in dark wood. The handle was cold, even through her glove.
Rose arrived 5 minutes early. Habit.
For a moment, she thought she was first. Only when she came closer did she see someone already there. Leaning against the wall, hands sunk into the pockets of his blazer, head bowed. He stood so still he almost blended into the stone. Victor Ashby looked up only when the sound of her steps echoed off the flagstones. Rose Hartley? He checked, though she was sure he knew. She nodded.
Victor, he said, we'll be working together in the archive.
He spoke calmly, in the tone used for stating facts, not starting friendships.
"You're early," he added after a moment.
"I prefer it that way," she replied. "Lateness looks bad on paper." The corner of his mouth shifted, barely.
In this school, ink matters more than the truth, he said. It's a good place for people who care about boxes and columns.
Only then did Rose notice the faint stains of ink on his shirt cuff. His tie was straight, his buttons done up. The only untidiness was the ink itself, like a mark left by holding a pen more often than a cigarette.
Have you been to the archive before? He asked.
No, she admitted. Just the ordinary part of the library.
Good.
He reached into his pocket for a key. People who come here too often start talking about the soul of the school. She heard no mockery in it, only a light irony aimed at the building rather than at her. That, at least, was a relief. He unlocked the door. Cold air spilled out, smelling of dust, old paper, and damp stone. The stairs down were narrow, the steps worn unevenly.
First the stairs, he said quietly. Then the catalog. Then you get used to it.
They descended in silence. Rose counted the steps, as always, 23. By the 20th, she could already feel the temperature drop. On either side of the corridor beyond the stairs, rows of doors stretched away, but Victor passed them without comment. Here. He stopped at a door with a small plaque that read, "Archive, by permission only. Llewellyn will be here soon. For now, we'll just go in." The room beyond was half dark. If there were any windows, they must have been high up, at the bottom of deep stone wells. At this time of day, they let in only thin, dirty ribbons of light that barely dented the gloom. Most of the work would have to be done under the desk lamps lined up along a long table that looked like an altar laid across the room. Metal shelves along the walls were stacked with cardboard boxes, each labeled with a date and a dry abbreviation. "You can leave your things here." Victor indicated a chair by the nearest desk. "No food, no drinks, and you're not allowed to breathe too loudly." She glanced sideways at him, wondering if he was serious. Again, that minimal movement at the corner of his mouth.
"I'm joking," he added before she could ask, "about the breathing."
She put down her bag and took out a notebook and pen. She did not yet know what she would need, but without them she felt exposed. For a moment they stood side by side, unsure what to do with their hands. Then Professor Llewellyn walked in, a tall woman in her 50s, gray jumper, tartan skirt.
She gave them a brief once-over.
Hartley, Ashby, she nodded. Good. We'll start with the simplest task, which will still be too much for you. Sorting.
She rattled off a few brisk instructions, pointing out the shelves they were allowed to touch and those they were not. When she left, they were alone with the boxes of years that made up the school's spine.
For the first few minutes, they worked without speaking. Rose passed boxes. Victor loaded them onto the trolley. Then they swapped roles. The air was filled only by the rustle of paper and the distant hum of the heating.
It was a different sort of silence than in the room with Caroline. That silence had been a kind of tension, an unspoken plea for Rose to stop planning her escape for a moment. This silence did not ask for anything.
Your handwriting is clear, Victor said eventually, setting down a card on which she had just scribbled something.
She looked at him, slightly taken aback. She had expected a remark about how quickly she worked, or a question about why she was in such a hurry. Instead, she got an observation with no obvious judgment attached.
"Is that a compliment?" she asked cautiously.
He considered before answering.
"It's a statement," he said at last. "But if you like, you can treat it as a compliment. Archives like things that can still be read after 20 years.
She was quiet for a while, shifting another file. There was no mockery or admiration in his voice. There was something she could not quite place. Perhaps simple notice. Perhaps the beginnings of respect.
"So is yours," she said after a moment, nodding at the labels he was writing on the new boxes. The letters were even, with no unnecessary flourishes.
He shrugged.
"My father says it's the only thing I do carefully," he muttered. "So at least the archive will be pleased."
She did not press. Normally, she would have used a crack like that to peer into someone's history, to inhale information like air. Now she simply filed it away, a note in the margin.
They worked on. Every so often their hands brushed over the same box, then one of them would pull back reflexively. No nervous jokes, no race to see who could carry more, just a rhythm. Reach, shift, set down, record.
After an hour, Rose realized this was the first time since arriving that she was not thinking about Whitby, the Cavendish Grant, or exactly how many percentage points still separated her from safety. She was thinking about the dates on the boxes, about the even letters on the labels, about the fact that someone here had once decided the year 1976 deserved its own crate.
Victor stepped away from the shelf, brushing dust from his sleeve. "That's enough for the first day," he said quietly. "If we keep this up, Professor Llewellyn will be the least of our problems."
"What will be the biggest?" she asked, more out of habit than curiosity.
He looked at the row of untouched boxes.
"What's inside?" he said.
He did not dramatize it. He spoke like someone who understood that an archive was not just a heap of papers, but a storehouse of other people's mistakes. For the first time, Rose thought that perhaps it was a good thing she had not been sent here alone. Victor was the last to leave the library. The lights in the reading room were already dimmed. The windows reflected only the silhouettes of shelves and the outlines of lamps. The corridor towards the exit was empty. Most pupils had long since moved on to dinner or the common rooms. He turned instead towards the garden. At this hour, the courtyard belonged to stone and cold. Damp seeped through his clothes, and the air smelled of wet grass and smoke that had not yet found its fire. Only after a moment did Victor notice a small point of glowing orange in the half-dark, rising and falling like a stubborn little star.
Matt was sitting on the low wall by the hedge, back against a stone pillar, one leg stretched carelessly out on the gravel. In one hand he held a cigarette, in the other a scrunched-up piece of paper that he kept folding and unfolding.
"Ashby," he said without looking away from the sky, "for someone who doesn't live in the library, you leave it suspiciously late." Victor stopped a few steps away.
"For someone with a million things to lose, you're smoking in a spot lit from 3 sides," he replied evenly. "The groundsman isn't blind." Matt gave a brief smile.
"The groundsman sees what he's paid to see."
He flicked ash onto the gravel.
"She was with you," he added after a moment, as if changing the subject, though they both knew that was the point. Hartley. Victor leaned against the pillar on the other side of the archway, making it look casual. He slid his hands into his pockets so it wouldn't show that they were slightly cold.
"We're assigned together in the archive," he said. "Regulations. Engagement program."
"Of course," Matt snorted. "Even exploitation sounds like an honor here." They were quiet for a while. Victor watched the smoke rise from the cigarette. It dispersed so quickly it was hard to believe that only hours earlier, in this same school, someone had been delivering a speech about the inevitability of fate. "Still the same martyr to learning as 2 years ago?" Matt asked at last. "Or is that just a phase on the way to becoming head librarian?" Victor looked at him carefully. "It's not martyrdom," he said quietly. "She just knows what she wants in return." Matt let out a laugh with no mirth in it. "We all know what we want. The scholarship, the surname, peace and quiet. The difference is who cries when they don't get it." "She won't cry," Victor said. "She'll crack on the inside and no one will see it. That's worse." Matt finally turned his head. For a heartbeat, their gazes met without the masks they both wore so stubbornly for everyone else. "You say that like you care," he observed. "I say it because I've watched how she works for years," Victor answered. "You see it too. You just pretend you don't." Matt drew deeply on the cigarette until the tip flared brighter.
"She has ambition," he said. "I have an ultimatum."
The paper in his hand trembled. Victor caught a glimpse of the letterhead, the Whitby crest. "Your father?" he asked, though he knew.
Matt laughed once, dryly.
"Who else?" He uncurled his fingers, letting the page flatten for a moment. "If you don't prove this year that you can maintain the Whitby standard, we'll have to reconsider the structure of inheritance," he quoted in a voice that was meant to sound indifferent. Elegant, isn't it? Almost like a line from a tragedy. Victor did not smile.
"That's not tragedy," he said. "That's blackmail." "At this school, they don't bother with the difference." Matt shrugged. "Both look good carved in stone."
Victor took a step away from the pillar. "You're asking about Rose," he said slowly. "So I'll tell you. She has more determination than you. Not more talent, not more luck. More determination, and less to lose." The words hung between them. Matt stayed silent for a heartbeat, then stubbed the cigarette out on the stone and dropped the butt in a nearby bin, one rule he always followed correctly. "I know," Matt said. The embers glowed briefly in the dark. "My father sent a note. Apparently the headmaster mentioned that competition this year is unusually close."
Victor frowned, leaning his shoulder back against the stone.
"Close? It's code, Ashby. It's easier to tell someone to win when you give them a specific face they're meant to beat." Matt glanced towards the dark windows of the library. "I've been warned. If Cavendish goes to Hartley, the name Whitby stops being an investment for my father, and he doesn't keep losing assets." There was no drama in his voice, only a tired sort of coolness. "And what are you going to do about it?" Victor asked. Matt's shrug this time was heavy, as if the blazer weighed a ton.
"What I always do," he said. "Play my part until the curtain comes down. You're on that list too. The committee likes you, and even so my father doesn't see you. To him you're part of the school's furniture. The real fight is between the blue blood and the girl who dared walk onto our grounds without an invitation."
He looked at Victor more sharply.
"You're the one who watches, Ashby, the one who knows what goes on backstage. Don't pretend you don't see how they're training us."
Victor was quiet for a moment.
"I see it," he said at last. "That's why I'm telling you this. She's not here to be a pawn in your family war. She's here to win her own."
Matt grimaced, but did not contradict him.
"We'll see. Fate likes people like that."
"Fate has nothing to do with it," Victor replied.
He turned and started back towards the dormitory. He could feel Matt's gaze on his back, as heavy as the rain that was about to fall. If there was any loyalty at St. Oswald's, it was this kind, the loyalty of shadows that saw the actors rotting on stage and stayed in the audience anyway.